Greetings once again. Today we're going to go back into graphing some trig functions, and this time we're going to talk about cosine. If you have not seen or know how to graph a sine function yet, I'm going to put a link in the description to my previous video on graphing different parameter changes of sine, so I'd recommend getting comfortable with that too, because graphing a cosine function is basically the same thing. The only thing that changes is we have to figure out what our new starting point is going to be based on the parent function. So again, if you're not comfortable with the different vocabulary and with the amplitude, period, and the different shifting, or with just the process of graphing a sine function, make sure and take a look at that first before we take a look at this video. But we're going to move on here and we're going to take a look at this function. So I've got 2 cosine of 3 pi over 4. I'm sorry, 3 over 4 x plus 2 pi plus 1. So I'm going to get the information out of here. So my a value is 2. We know that deals with the amplitude. 3 over 4 is my b value. My h value is negative 2 pi. Don't forget to change the sign. And my k value is positive 1. And my period, we know we always do 2 pi over whatever the b value is, 3 over 4. And in this case, that's going to be 8 pi over 3. And for my tick marks, again, we're going to divide the period by 4 because we have 4 different sections. And it's going to make doing our pattern a little bit easier. So we got 8 pi over 3. Over 4, and when we simplify that, that's going to end up being 2 pi over 3. Okay, so we have our information here. Now what we got to do, we have to transfer this information to the graph. And so I'm going to draw my x and y axis, and I'll bring this back and forth a little bit so we can make sure we get our different values. So here we go. Draw my nice big XY axis. Here we go. And I'm going to label the x-axis first. And again, my tick marks are 2 pi over 3. And I like skipping lines so things don't get kind of all scrunched together. So 2 pi over 3, my first line. So think to yourself for just a second, what would the next line be? If I'm adding 2 pi over 3 each time, 2 pi over 3 and another 2 pi over 3 would be 4 pi over 3. Do the same thing, add another 2 pi over 3, so that's 6 pi over 3. But if you think about it, 6 pi over 3 is 2 pi. Add another 2 pi over 3, so it'd be 8 pi over 3. 10 pi over 3. And then 12 pi over 3 would be 4 pi. And we'll do the same exact thing, kind of going backwards. So we have that, and then we're also going to do our y-axis. Our y-axis is just simple, just 1, 2, 3 all the time. Unless you have a really strange amplitude, then it might change, but most of the time we can do 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we are ready to go. So. And we want to find our new origin. Just like we did with the sine function, we want to find our new origin. And to do that, we look at our h and k values. So my h was negative 2 pi, and my k is positive 1. So I go to negative 2 pi, and I'm going to draw a dotted line right through negative 2 pi. And I'm going to draw another dotted line through my k value of positive 1. And again, I call this my equator. kind of the midline of the graph. And there we have it. So I've got my graph set up with all my information. Now all I got to do is figure out where my graph is actually going to start and then use my amplitude. Okay, so before we do that, let me show you a picture of a parent function of the cosine, which you probably already know, but I'll show it to you here anyway. So let's take a look at one period here. So we start at 0, go to 2 pi on the parent function. But notice, instead of starting at the origin, now we're starting at the maximum value. Or another way to look at it is we're starting at the amplitude. So we start at the amplitude, and then, assuming it's a positive, then we're going to go down to the middle, down to the equator. We're going to go down to the minimum value, back to the equator, and then back to our maximum, and that'll be one full period. And then we can extend that as long as we want to, if we want to do more of the graph. So we're going to do that. So we have our new origin right here. So we know our origin from the sine function is right here, but now we have to look at our amplitude, and our amplitude was positive 2. So instead of starting at the origin, I'm going to go up 2 units. There's 1 and 2. So my starting point is going to be at negative 2 pi 3. Negative 2 pi in the x and then 3 on the y-axis. And then from here, now it's just the pattern. So now I know I've got my maximum point. I go to my next tick mark. I mark it on the equator. The next tick mark is going to go down the amplitude. So I go down 2 units, down to negative 1 in this case. And then my next tick mark over and back up to the equator. And I got one more section to go, back up to my maximum point. And that would be one full cycle, one full period. Again, I'm going to go and make a few more because I don't know, the cosine graph to me, when you do one period, just kind of looks kind of funny. So I'm going to do a couple more cycles here. And just maintaining that same pattern over and over and over again. And I'm going to go backwards a couple times. So we have that. And then we're going to sketch the curve in, nice smooth, hopefully. And there we have it. And there is our graph of that cosine function with all those different parameter changes. So again, there was our equation with our different values. And that's what the graph's going to look like. And the main thing, for class, if we do one full period, I'm going to be okay with that. But it's always good to have more is not bad. If we can do more and do it in a good, accurate way. Okay, so at this time, I'm going to show you another problem that I want you to do on your own. Even if you don't have graph paper, you can just do a piece of notebook paper and kind of do the tick marks nice, evenly spaced. And you can do it that way too. Graph paper just kind of makes it easier, but you can do it that way also. So I'm going to flip this piece of paper over. And here is one for you to do on your own. And you can pause the video and take a look at that and see if you can do that on your own. The one thing I will tell you, be careful as you do this, and we did talk about this in class a little bit. Make sure we have to factor out this b value in order to get it into our standard form, in order to find the h. So this time, pause the video and work on this for a few minutes. If you get stuck, I'm going to continue on and work through this as well. So hopefully by now you have at least factored that out. If you got stuck with the factoring part of it, let's take a look at that real fast. So this is still the b value. So my 5 pi over 4 is still my b value. Okay? So I'm going to do this kind of down below the tick marks here just so I can have some more space. So it's going to be -3 cosine, big parentheses, 5 pi over 4, parentheses, x. Now we need to figure out, if we factor this 5 pi over 4 out, notice I don't have the pi anymore. So what I am going to have is -4 over 5. Take a minute if you need to, and see if you can see why this becomes this. If I distribute this back through, 5 pi x over 4. If I distribute this through, 5 times 4, 4 times 5, so it just becomes minus pi. So this is what I'm talking about here. The only thing that changes when I fill in my values from this to this is my h value. Still my a, -3. My b, 5 pi over 4. My h, +4 over 5. And my k is -2. So at this time, if you got stuck just on that one step, go ahead and pause the video again. Find your period, find your tick marks, and then go ahead and start graphing, finding your starting point in the graph. So hopefully you have found the period, and to do that, we always do the same thing. We do 2 pi over 5 pi over 4. And of course we can simplify that. That's 2 pi times 4 over 5 pi. And that's going to be 8 pi over 5. Sorry, pi's cancel, so it'd be 8 over 5. Just 8 over 5. My apologies. And then for the tick marks, we're going to do 8 over 5 divided by 4, which is 8 over 5 times 1/4. And we can simplify that to 2 over 5. So period, divide the period by 4, 2 over 5. So now it's time to do our x and y axis. And remember, this is kind of a strange one, 2 over 5. So I'm going to go skip a line like I always do, 2/5. Think to yourself for a minute, what would the next lines be? So 2 over 5, 4 over 5, 6 over 5, 8 over 5, and then 10 over 5, which is just 2. And I can go backwards. And my y-axis always is going to be 1, 2, 3. Now we're ready to do our dotted lines for h and k. So I'm going to go right 4 over 5 and down 2. So right 4 over 5, here's one dotted line. And down 2. And now I'm ready to, so this is my new origin, but remember, this is a cosine function, so this is not starting on the origin. We have to use the amplitude right away to see where our starting point is going to be. So in this case, my a was negative, so instead of starting at a maximum, and remember, I'll bring my parent function up one more time, so instead of starting at a maximum, it's going to start at a minimum and be reflected, be upside down. So I'm going to start here at my origin, and my A value was -3, so I'm going to go down 3. I need to get one more line down here. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. So my starting point's going to be way down here at -5. And now I do my pattern. Again, it's just the reverse. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go back up to my equator at the next tick mark. Next tick mark, I'm going to go up 3. So 1, 2, 3, that'll be a +1. Next tick mark, back down to the equator. And go to my next tick mark and down to the minimum. And I can make this, I guess I need to do a couple more tick marks on this end. 8/5, 10/5, 12/5. And I'm going to stop there. But I'm going to go backwards a couple times. So I can go back 1 tick mark and then do the pattern in reverse. So equator. And then back to the axis. Next tick mark up to +1. Next tick mark over, down to the equator. And then next tick mark down to -5 again. And then I'm going to try to get, this one's a little bit steeper. I always have a hard time with steep graphs, but I'll see what I can do. So try to get a nice smooth curve in here. And there we have it. So from here to here is one full cycle. Did a little bit extra, but that is what that graph is going to look like. Hopefully your graph looked just like that, if not better. And again, here's your function. Thank you again for watching. This was how to graph a cosine function with all the different parameter changes. I will have a video up shortly about how to also graph tangent and cotangent functions. And then shortly thereafter, there'll be one more function, there'll be one more video on how to graph cosecants and secants, which are really easy if you know how to graph sines and cosines. So again, thank you for watching. Hope you got something out of this. Hope you learned, and this helped you out on how to graph cosines. Thank you again. Have a great day.